Hi, welcome back to my series on Transport Fever 2. I've had to take some real drastic measures to be able to continue playing on this map. This is not the first time I've had to do it, but this time it was really serious. Last episode, I had a lot of trouble creating that episode. I needed to do it in around about 7 or 8 parts. The game would crash every few minutes. I got at best maybe 5 minutes of game time before the game would crash, which made it almost impossible to make last episode. When I came back in this time, it it really needed some serious work done on the map. You'll see that we're up to all the way up to 2041 now. I've had a long time of playing in map, trying to rebalance the game. I wanted the calendar to continue because I really just wanted to advance up sort of into the future. It's where I wanted to aim for the target of this series to go well into the 2000s, which I'd never done before. Um, I, I'll touch on two mistakes I've made in the game. Now I'm on console, but if you're a PC player, you may not have the game crashing on you, but your frame rate may reduce down to the point where it's almost unplayable. Like it probably doesn't crash like it does on console, but um, it might get to that stage where it's almost unplayable. My game got to the point where it's unplayable, and the two mistakes I think I've made, in particular on console, was the electric lines. Now, the electric lines take up a lot of file size, and we have a file size, it seems like a file size restriction. As soon as you go over a 300 megabyte file size, you have serious problems on console. And the second problem is that I'm using Dynamic Industries mod. And what I did was around about coming up to 2000, I realized I had maxed out the whole map. I was every resource was was fully upgraded, producing 400 goods, being delivered to a factory, and the factories were running at maximum. The cities were being delivered the maximum number of goods that I could possibly deliver. And I thought I would push the game to see if I could push the limit of doubling all of the production on the map. So what I've done is I've made it a two times industry ability, and that is that um, there's now a second level of production on every resource, so that they, instead of producing 400 crude in this case, it now produces 800, effectively doubling the industry on the whole map. Now, I have industry maxed out at the highest level of industry, which is 132 industries. I do have sandbox mode open at the moment, so I can show you that I can't put another crude oil on the map. It says that, oh, it's not 132, it's 129 industries is is the maximum number of industries on the map. So I had that setting at the beginning of the game. It spawned 129. I also had it so that it had a high rate of closures. So I had industries moving around all over the map regularly, and then when they spawned into a position that I really liked, I then activated them by linking them together. And so in this case, I had a crude here, a crude here, and an oil here. Um, Once they'd spawned into those positions, I liked those positions, so I then linked them in and secured them basically into their positions. I actually have it all switched off now because I don't have any spawning. Now there is a way of disabling that. You just tell your industry density to be disabled, it won't spawn any more industries. That's I never knew what that setting actually did, but at the beginning, a lot of players probably don't realize that the industry density, if you set it to high, it will continue to spawn industries all the way up to 129 industries. If you want to pick medium number of industries, then you need to set the density to match medium, so it will just spawn up to a medium amount, maybe 98 or 100 industries on the map, something like that, but it won't go any higher. And if you don't want any spawning whatsoever, then you just disable that, and that's what that setting is. I actually didn't. I haven't seen many people explain what that setting does, and um, yeah, I now know exactly what it does. Anyway, the mistake is doubling the industry on the map. By doubling the industry on the map, I effectively doubled the size the cities could grow. And it got to the point that the cities were growing, all of the cities. Now, I started with medium-sized cities as well, medium amount of cities. So the maximum number of cities you can have is 16. I set it to medium, so I had 12 cities on the map. So I didn't even have the maximum number of cities, but those cities were now doubling. By the way, just going back to maximum, this is maximum number of industries, so a high level of industry to a medium level of city. I didn't have enough industries to supply the medium level of city. I had to double the number of industries to supply my cities to get them into a higher growth rate. Okay, so what I've had to do is I've gone into the settings and I've reduced the base size of my cities, because now I'm supplying so much to the cities that the game is freaking out. It's not even letting the cities grow to their full extent. It's like a maximum population on the map, and then it doesn't grow anymore. And I obviously reached a maximum population on the map, and so it was nerfing my city. So this city here wants to grow to 1748. It's not there. It's at 1739. So what I've been doing is trying to balance them, because in a lot of cases my target population was a lot higher than what the actual city growth was. So an example of that will probably be Kendall. But no, I've already reduced this down. It was 2650, I think. And so the city size was 2400, but it was trying to grow to 2600. And what I've done is I've used sandbox mode to reduce this. I think it was about 220 as its base size for each, and I've reduced that down to 190, which has balanced the target population with the actual population. So it's nicely balanced now, and it's had a little bit of a downturn to do that. I've done that in almost all of the cities, I think. I've rebalanced them so that the target population, see, that's been nerfed now. It got nerfed down to 1729, which is lower than its actual. So it is reducing in size still, and I want it to get to a balance. So what I'll do is I'll drop it to 120 as a base. And that way, if I've got capacity there in the target population, if I've got extra capacity there, it will reduce the city size down slightly, and you just saw a whole heap just move out of here. So it just did reduce the city size down a little, and we're now dropped down under 1700. So that's what I've done, just very slowly. I've just little bit by little bit. Now, Alsager I've reduced quite a bit, as you can see on the graph there, but I'm looking to get back to like a pre-2000 city size. So I think I've achieved that. It's around about the 2004 city size there. And that seems to have made the game run a lot smoother, that it's not continually trying to rebalance these cities. And if I come back a little bit later, this might move up to around about 1700 again. I'll be interested to see if it does. Okay, one of the one of the drastic changes I've made, if you haven't noticed already, the airports are gone. Not only are the city size has been reduced a little, the airports, that made a huge difference actually when I removed the airports, both to sort of the frame rate of the game, how smooth the game ran, how jumpy it was, and it also reduced the file size down. And for console, we actually have like once you go over 300 megabytes, you have a lot of problems with your save games. So uh, deleting all of the airports. So the one in Swindon is gone as well. We have a new coastline here in Swindon, and the airport that was here is gone. With a little bit of adjustment in here, there's no factories in here anymore. A more simplified tram line. The tram lines have been simplified to a much smaller tram. This is the, oh geez, I can't remember what these are called. Uh, if we change them, I'll be able to be reminded that it's the Skoda. And I was running these ones here, but I didn't need the capacity. And when I put these in an episode or two ago, that really ramped, these trams really ramped up my file size as well. I was already running the Skodas in Hemsworth, and so by adjusting and keeping just the one type of tram on the map instead of having the two types of trams, that really helped as well. I don't think these tram lines helped in putting them in. In fact, I have been thinking about removing the trams um, and changing them over to buses. But the capacity on the tram line is not as high as what I first had when I first put the lines in. Once it rebalanced, I could get away with smaller trams. So I've made an adjustment there. Oh, while we're down here with the farms, I've simplified my farms. So where there were maybe 12 fields in here, they were all diced up into smaller fields. I've reduced the number of roads that were in here and simplified the decoration extensively through this area as well. Much more simpler fields that are here, along with removing my old truck lines that were more decorative, older style trucks that I was running. They're all gone now. If we look at the lines, they used to be at the top list of the lines. All those TFS lines are gone now. They were just decorative lines that were not actually performing any function. I simplified the fields down here as well and removed like all the roads around here, which has made a difference. So the big double airport that was up at Bolton, that's gone. So we had two airports here at Bolton, along with reducing the size of Bolton a little, reducing the size of Woodham, and removing a whole heap of unnecessary roads in the area. I've even gone to the extent of removing some forests. I don't know how much of an impact the forestry on the map is making. What I might do is test a little bit more forest removal on the map and see if that makes a difference. I'm not sure that it does, but reducing these city sizes down, they're still pretty much the same size as what they were. They're just more balanced. They're not. The game is not having to nerf this city. The target population equals the residents, basically. That's what I've been aiming for when reducing this size down, and that meant I could remove a whole heap of unnecessary roads that looked good on the outside of the town, but served no function. So Maghull has really come down in size. It's now under 1,000 residents, but it wasn't that much more than 1,000 previously. But its target population was like 1,200, and it constantly reduced the target population down because I think I'd hit a maximum population that the game will allow on the map. So I've just rebalanced all of that, removed the airlines. Removing the airlines was, I think, on console in particular, the airlines are not a good choice. So now I'm relying on my high-speed trains to move passengers around. So my train lines are a little bit busier. They probably need some rebalancing. Um, and I have been forced to. This is our high-speed train line. We do have 6 on the line now. I think we had 5 before. Yeah, you can see that there's a new train that was added 2 years ago. So, last episode would have been about 27 years ago, probably somewhere around there. Last couple of episodes that was put in, and just recently 10 years and 2 years. Well, 10 years was probably more like last episode. So I have played a fair bit. I've let the calendar run while rebalancing the game because I am getting to the end game here, and I really did want to move into the future to see how the game ran in the future. The second big so the airports was the first drastic change that I took. The second one was I deleted Basildon. I deleted an entire city because of that overpopulation on the map. That I'd sort of hit that limit of what the map could handle. I thought this was my best choice of bringing the city sizes down by actually removing a city. It was a primary fuel city, and there is a lack of fuel on the map. There are only 3 fuel refineries on the map. So I really did want to get rid of a primary fuel city if I got rid of any. And that meant I didn't want to get rid of Staines, and I didn't want to get rid of Kendall, and I didn't want to get rid of Fordwich. So Basildon was the easy choice to make up in the north. It means the north is very quiet up here. It's really just a couple of cities up north here now. I also played around with the idea of taking some of my train lines back to Class 142s, making them standard rail, no overhead wires, back to a diesel passenger train. Because the overhead wires really made a big difference when I put all of them in on the passenger lines. I think that is a source of problem on console. Yeah, I have no way of being able to electrify the whole map. That would definitely kill the map. But just electrifying all of my passenger lines was a huge problem. So that combined with the airlines, the double industry, I don't recommend it. I recommend you play your game without it. Max out the amount of factories that you've got, even if it is the maximum number of factories and resources, and have that as your end game. Like you do, if you double the amount of resources on the map, you do break the game in. You do break the game in console. Um, I've seen a lot of PC players use it, and I've also seen at their end games their frame rate just goes to it's just the worst, and it's almost unplayable almost unwatchable. Um, and so you can push this game to its limit by doubling the industry on the map. I really don't recommend it. I also don't recommend using airlines um, unless you've got that extra capacity in your game to use them. Then sure, but they do take up a lot of resources, frame rate wise and file size wise. So I've had to take um, some really drastic measures to have my game playable again. Uh, I am going to save this record. I can't believe we've gotten this far without a crash. So the game is running a hell of a lot better. So I'm back again. I did push it to the limit. I was interested in seeing in the second section how far I could push it. And I got to about another 20-minute record and it did crash. So in all up, I got about 40 minutes of gameplay before the game crashed. Now, that is so much better than uh, 3 to 5 minutes of gameplay. So the changes I've made have significantly fixed the problem, but not totally. It's not totally fixed. So what I was talking about in the next 20 minutes of record that I lost were further changes that I might make to the map, maybe to make it a little better. I haven't really wanted to reduce the size of my capital cities. I have three capital cities. That's Kendall in the south, Staines in the central area, and Bracknell in the north. I have reduced them in size a little bit. So we can see that Bracknell still got a target population that's a little bit too high at 2,500 with about 2,400 residents. So I have done a little bit of rebalancing there. Um, and you can see just a slight rebalancing um, in Bracknell. I did do a little bit in Staines, maybe 2,600. Yeah, you can see that I've made a slight adjustment there. And in Kendall, I made a significant change here down to 2,400. So Staines is probably the biggest city on the map. Kendall was bigger, and it has reduced down just slightly, not a lot. Um, but another big change that I made is I actually made a couple of changes to the industries. So I have fuel that is running from Auckland Fuel Refinery all the way down to Supply Fordwich. And it was coming back empty. And I was thinking, look, I really want to look at how efficient some of my lines are. In very hard mode, um, you really do need to be super efficient with your lines, the best that you can anyway. Like there are a lot of lines that will go back empty. This grain train, there's no option here. This grain train will will bring the grain down and it will come back. To make it the most efficient that I can, is I've made it 740 goods train with is it double engine? It needs to be double engine because of the size of it. Otherwise, it crawls along way too slow on a train this size. But effectively, what I wanted to do was basically bring in 800 grain. Um, but this is a maximum size train that I can push 500 meters into a 500-meter platform down here, and by being able to run 740 grain, it comes back empty, but on its trip down, it carries um, enough grain to make, and grain isn't a very profitable line. And if we look at its profit margins, every now and then it makes a ton of money because it gets like a double delivery. When when the maintenance is set to normal, it kind of breaks even. But when the maintenance is set to high, it loses a little bit of money. But that's about as efficient that I can make a line by making it longer using a 120 kilometer engine instead of, say, a 160 kilometer engine, double engine on this train. This train not really making a lot of money, but it's delivering goods really fast. And I'm losing a little bit of profit margin on a train like this um, due to the more expensive engines, the more expensive cars. It runs faster though. And I'm not maxing out the train size here on a 500 meter platform because there is a restriction on the size of the platform here in Kendall, for example. So you can see that on this end, the goods train is using its maximum size on this platform. However, we are carrying fuel, and we are carrying a significant amount of fuel all the way down to Fordwich here, as I was saying. The train's coming back empty. That's our goods train there. And so what I decided to do is, this is our fuel train here. It's bringing in a good amount of fuel. But what I did is I moved an oil well down to Fordwich here, down to Fordwich Steel. And they now pick up the crude on the way back, making the fuel train also carry crude all the way back here, which now makes that train profitable. And it delivers the crude into here, which is what used to happen here. We used to have a crude oil well here, delivering by truck into this truck stop here. And that was actually one of the very first cargo lines we ever put on, train lines that we ever put on the map. We delivered the crude here, came up to the fuel. Second crude would come in from here. Then all the crude came up to the oil refinery. The fuel comes back. The fuel gets buried back by a transfer train that runs through the steel here, transfers all sorts of goods down to here. And then we have our goods trains which are linking in to the likes of Alsager and Fordwich. They don't actually have to come into here, into this cargo hub here. They just have to come into here and they can turn around here. And so instead of having all the trains come in, I just have one train line which is transferring goods through here. Another big change I made, so I did that one industry change. I also realized that there wasn't enough steel on the map. I was actually short one steel mill. When you counted up the number of factories that needed steel, there was one extra goods and machine parts are the two factories that need them. And so when you look at a steel mill, you can see how many places on the map require steel. So there are 2, 4, 6, 8 factories on the map that require steel. But we only had so to look at how many places need, how do I do that? How do I look at how many steel mills are on the map? Why? So that's all of the coal mines. Oh, if I look at a goods factory, this will tell me, there we go. This tells me how many steel mills are on the map. So with 4 goods factories on the map, I need 4 chemical plants. And I have 4 chemical plants, but I also need 8 steel mills. So there's 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 steel mills now on the map, but we were actually short one, which meant my goods factories were just not shipping anywhere near enough. And in this case, this should improve in the future because I have put an extra steel mill on the map, and that's this one here. Now, there's a trick to rebalancing your map at the end of the game. If you find that you need one more steel mill, well, that's not only one more steel mill, it's one steel mill plus 4 resources that supply it. So you'll need 2 coal and 2 iron to supply this steel mill. But at the end of the game, I have kind of cheated this steel mill in to rebalance the game. And to do that, in the configure mode, in sandbox mode, you can turn the input off. So this steel mill is now operating and it's producing 800 steel, but you can see underneath the rule says that it just produces steel. It just produces steel. That's all it does. This steel mill over here, which is what you get in a normal base game, you get a steel mill that requires 2 coal and 2 iron. It converts that into steel. This steel mill I've cheated into my end game here. It just produces the steel. Now, I needed 1 industry slot on the map to be able to get 1 extra industry on the map, because I was running at the maximum number of industries. So what I did was I converted this construction materials and told it doesn't need stone anymore. It just produces the it just produces the conmats. Now, in any future games that I play, if I ever do this in the future, I think I'll represent these as imported products. So, if I rebalance this, I would move this construction materials and maybe put it on an island over here on the edge of the map and treat it as a shipping import from an external source and represent that as just the conmats come in and get shipped in. I think that would be a better way of representing a resource that is not being produced locally, but it is being imported from outside the map. I like that idea, rather than what I've done here with just switching the stone off. Now, in switching the stone off, we no longer have a stone quarry here. We actually have produced a bay here, which, in the future, I wouldn't mind putting a port here and removing this and having the construction materials being imported in from outside the map. However, I didn't do that with this steel, but I could do that. I could build a port over here and have the conmats and the steel on an island over here that imports the steel into here and links into here, maybe with a truck route that would just run over to here and deliver into the factories here. So I could represent this a lot better than what I have. So I stole a stone from here and added a steel mill, and that's rebalanced the game, the industries a little better as well. I've removed a oil well, you know, storyline. Well, the oil supply ran out. They had extracted all the oil from here, and then there was a flood into these lowlands, and the land was reclaimed into a bay, and we moved the oil wells down to here, so our oil train now runs in both directions. And if we can find him again, he's all the way up here. There he is here. So instead of returning empty, he's returning full now. So he's transporting 420 crude, and he brings about 200 fuel back down. If we look at his financial page, I still got a bit of a cough from a cold that I had last week, so I haven't been able to play or record last week. You'll see in the earlier part of this graph, this train was losing a lot of money. And what's happened is by making this adjustment, I lost the delivery here of the truck route, but I've gained now a fuel train, which effectively is a more efficient way of delivering the fuel and returning the crude. And what I might do is, there isn't much life left in the map. I do want to make some more adjustments to make it more efficient, but I think I'd like to rebalance the map a little bit where I've got lines which are just have no hope of making any money. And a good way of looking at that at the moment would be to look at our lines and tell it to sort by balance. And actually, we don't have many train lines on this map that are losing money. We do have a few there, but I wouldn't say that losing $1 million on a stone line. Well, let's go to something like this stone line here. This is a dead end stone line, right? Well, it just made money, so it just dropped down into the list a little. There it is there. So if I went to this and told it to locate it, this is a stone line. What is it? The Woodham stone. It picks up stone here. Yeah, it's that single line that runs it all the way around and delivers the stone here into Woodham. Now, so this line isn't making much money. Why? Because it's not bringing anything back. It's a one-way trip, and there is a way that I could maybe rebalance this. So, but I'm not really looking at doing this to make all of my lines absolutely perfect in a profit margin. I'm really just looking at the very worst. And one of the worst lines was that fuel line, which is why I targeted it. The Alsager grain line has been a thorn in my side almost for the entire game, ever since it was put in. And it's this grain line running around here. And the reason why it doesn't make any money is it goes the long way round. It goes all the way around the outside of this line. And I think if I just trucked the grain straight across into here, instead of transporting these farms over on this side over here, they get a pickup here and a pickup here. And then instead of trying to cut a train line through there, what I did is I followed the existing train line that's here for the oil and into this hub over here. We've got two factories over here. We've got a food processing and we got a machines factory and we got delivery into the town. So this rail hub here is also linking into logs and planks. And so it's a pretty good central area for a train line here, except this train, it just never makes any money. I'm happy with that. I mean, I've been happy with with a few of my train lines not being as financially beneficial as what they could be. But if I scroll down and I get down into the second half of my lines, I've got some lines here that are absolutely killing it. Um, and this Fordwich steel line is a really good example of a line that's using double engine expensive trains, and they're down here. And so they're transferring steel in between Fordwich steel and Kendall steel. So again, little cheaty. I'm taking advantage. This was one of my early lines as well that made me a ton of money. My oil lines made a fair bit of money early on in game. My really big earner was, instead of delivering this steel to this goods factory, and by the way, this one does not deliver to here. It links directly into the train station, but it doesn't link, like the steel isn't being transferred to there, and steel isn't being transferred to there. This steel and this steel is being, one of them's going across to here, and the other one is coming down to Fordwich. So it's delivering the steel down here, and this steel is not delivering to here. This steel is going up to this one here. And once I had a steel mill and a goods factory next to each other, I found a goods factory and a steel mill next to each other, and that works beautifully. Along with the steel, all of the coal that's up here actually gets on a train and brings the coal down to this steel factory. On the way back, it picks up this coal here and takes it to this steel factory. A huge money maker, which I might implement in my future series that I'm doing on Race to the North. I might put in a few lines which takes advantage of the way that the game pays you for deliveries. And so that line, which is one of my most profitable lines, is really taking advantage of that system. The coal line that I was just talking about also takes advantage of that system. I got a crude and oil which delivers, well, where did he go? Is another good one as well. It delivers both ways, crude one way, oil the other. The plastics line is really good here. I've got some grain lines, my fuel line. That's my fuel line that is now that adjusted one that I moved the crude oil wells. That's now a really profitable line by moving the crude that was here down to here. Now what I was doing earlier on in the game is I wasn't connecting that crude in here. I was letting it respawn somewhere. It would have been better for me to let that one, to disconnect it so that it wasn't being connected anymore, and let it respawn anywhere down this side of the map. Would have been very cool, because then I had an oil train, so the fuel gets delivered here. So any extra crude down this end would have worked as well. Anywhere down here would have worked. But instead of waiting for something to spawn, I just placed it. Okay? Very cheaty, I know. But this is basically, I'm at endgame now, guys. I'm actually reducing my city sizes. I'm trying to reduce some decorative things that I put into the map. I reduced the map by one full city by deleting a city. And I'm reducing some of the unnecessary roadways. Or here's a farm I haven't done. So this has a line on it, doesn't it? So here, oops, 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 oops. Uh, we want to delete these old trucks by selling them. So I can sell. So all of them. Then I will delete the line. Now these ones didn't have a space in front of them, did they? These ones are down here under TFS. There's probably, oh look, there's two. Okay, so we'll delete that line, yes. And then I probably shouldn't have deleted that road, but I could definitely delete this road. And this road. This road. Can probably delete some of these waypoints are not needed anymore. Can I see where the waypoints are? There was a couple out here, wasn't there? Yeah, there's one out there. That's probably good enough. A road. Okay, just simplifying it down. Just little things like that will take a little bit of unnecessary decoration. I wonder if reducing these decorative farms down to be just decorative fields and not all of these sections here might make a change to the map. Not really sure. And maybe reducing some of these forests down where it's not really, I don't really need the amount of forests that are on the map at the moment. It's a very high number. Strength, is that remove? That is remove. So what I'm thinking is something like this. Probably needs a little bit of smoothing. Something like that. Let's just do that. So I'm thinking maybe reducing some of the forestry down on the map might make a difference to there we go. Anyway, I thought I'd give you an update on the map and the big changes that I've made, and some of the smaller changes. Some of yes, a little bit cheaty. Sims has, done some landscaping as well, taking away a little bit more land in here, taking a little bit more land away in here. Remove some forests in here, remove some forest over here. I think this was fairly heavily forested in here. And hopefully it makes my game run a little smoother. Thank you very much for watching. I will save the game here. I would also like to point out where we're at in the map. We're actually now making money like crazy. Most of my lines are running efficiently. We've transported 31.5 million goods on the map, and we have transported 4.2 million passengers. I don't know, I think those numbers are pretty high. Yeah, and now my money is the first time like in my whole gameplay where I really don't have an issue with money anymore. For most of the gameplay on this map, I've had to be really careful with money, but not so much of a problem now. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye for now.